So, dahil meron po tayong hinihintay ngayon at baka tayo po ay dumalo rin sa parating na November 30 Trillion Peso March Part 2, handa na ba kayo kay scholar activist, UP lecturer, political analyst, millennial leader, ang pambansang cutie pie. Ayan, organizer of Tindig Pilipinas, Francis Joseph Kiko Aquino Dee.
Magandang gabi po, Miss Korina. Magandang gabi po sa lahat ng mga nanonood po ngayon. Thank you for the very kind introduction. I don't know how accurate, pero very kind po.
Well, but do you recede in an embarrassment with all of those titles given to you?
A bit. Like, halimbawa, yung political analyst, wala pa na, I never got the license to be a political analyst, so
Right.
binigay na lang yun sa akin, di ko na kinokorek.
There's really no course to be a political analyst.
It's a very informal thing, eh. But,
Yeah.
yun, it's...
I think it all depends on how many people listen to you when you give your analysis.
I suppose. And then, I think in my case, what I give isn't really the purely objective analysis. No? It's really coming from a particular point of view. So,
Well, people want to know what the 30-something-year-olds are thinking because you catapulted like some senators that they thought would never make it. Yun, sabi nga nila, yung boto ng inyong henerasyon, ng inyong kaidaran, malaking bagay no sa kahihinat na ng bayan natin.
interesting po yun eh. Kasi parang may nakita po kasi akong survey ng Pulse Asia. Hindi nila na-release before the election, pero it was done siguro the last week of the campaign. And then binreakdown ulit nila yung boto kada senator for each demographic. And in that one, kahit sa Gen Z, number 4 pa lang si Senator Bam eh.
Oh.
So, it did better compared to other generations. Tama. So, may factor yung Gen Z. Pero it doesn't explain the whole thing eh. Kung
Right.
paano siya umabot ng number 2. Parang something else beyond the generational factor was there.
Right.
And that's, I think, something that still needs to be parsed.
Well, you and me both. I also wonder, not just on Bam or Kiko, I mean, other personalities that you didn't think would make it. Do you trust the machines?
Which, the voting machine.
Yeah, the new voting machine, Miro.
Broadly, I do. No? I think there are a lot of questions to be had, and Comelec, I think, could do a better job answering yung mga tanong ng mga yung mga eksperto, yung mga nakakaalam talaga sa engineering. But I think, by and large, the will of the people finds a way to be expressed. No? Na nitong 2025, maraming hindi natutuwa sa Marcos administration, whether because supporter ka ni President Duterte at marami yung very well into the feud between Marcos and Duterte na tayo at that point. Or because you were looking at ilang economic factors na we came off of several quarters straight na umabot ng 60% yung self-rated hunger, which is historic high. And similarly, the satisfaction rating of the president, bumaba siya to the negatives during the first few quarters of this year. So I think that, the fact that talagang medyo mahina yung performance ng alliances late nung 2025 reflects yung ganong repudiation ng mga tao. And ni-recognize nga yun ni President Marcos in his SONA, which gave birth to so many of the issues, the discussions we're having now. Sinabi niya na he took it as a repudiation this last election. So I think that was a sound interpretation.
But with so many things happening right now, I mean, you wouldn't be surprised why so many other issues fall behind, right? I mean, where are the sabongeros now? And then
Right.
there's just so much.
Right.
Parang it was a whole can of worms. Do you think that the president was ready when he gave out that list of 15 contractors that eto umabot na sa BIR, DICT,
Yeah.
hanggang sa health, hanggang sa education?
Well, honestly, I'm not really that reliable to give a fair assessment of the president for very biased reasons po. No? Pero yung tingin ko talaga, hindi siya handa para sa fallout ng sinabi niya. So parang, kasi ang naisip ko, yung flood control kasi, lumitaw siya nung 2024 SONA, di ba? Na pinagmalaki niya yung sobrang laking perang ginasta for flood control. And a few days later, bumaha kung saan-saan sa Metro Manila. So napagtripan siya. So going into the 2025 SONA, I think dala-dala niya yung kahihiyan na yun. Gusto niyang bubawi. So he said, okay, kayo mga nangungurakot sa flood control, mahiya naman kayo. And then he set up a website, yung isumbong sa Pangulo. He had that list. I think he thought that would be it. Pero talagang pumutok into all
Sumabog,
of this. So I don't get the sense that he was ready.
Right. Kilala ka doon sa rating the government thumbs up, thumbs down.
I don't think I've ever given them a thumbs up, to be fair.
And you're not about to do it now. No. O, wag na natin yan. Baka ma-screenshot pa siya. Ayan na naman, meme na naman yan. O, wag na lang. Okay. So, let's just first talk about November 30. So ngayon, itong November 30, was promised, it was planned. Is everything coming along as planned?
We're doing quite well. I just actually came from another coordination meeting for the 30th. Oh, naman po. Today actually, this morning, we had one of our walkthroughs po with the QCPD tsaka yung MMDA dun sa area sa People Power Monument, made some slight adjustments to the floor plan based on their recommendations. Really, the safety of everyone will be attending is paramount concern.
So no one in Luneta, all now along EDSA?
I understand there's also a group organizing in Luneta po, but we are focused on the activities sa EDSA.
I see. So how do we make sure that, the small riot that happened, the violence that erupted in Manila doesn't happen again?
So I think, at least on our end, we're very grateful na our relationship with the QC City Hall, with the QCPD, MMDA, it's been very facilitative. It's been built up over several years because even before yung September 21 na Trillion Peso March, we'd been organizing in People Power Monument. So we have good relationships with them. We are credible when we tell them na kami yung in charge sa hanay namin. We have our own marshals to make sure our ranks don't do anything unruly or untoward. We cascade yung mga recommendations ng QCPD. For example, they recommend that those coming with bags, dapat transparent po yung dadalhin sa rally area para kita yung mga gamit sa loob. And so we can avoid bringing in any dangerous items. So I think that coordination is very helpful. And also, hopefully the message gets across po na yung we're very grateful po for the leadership of the different religious organizations, especially the Catholic Church with the CBCP. Very consistent naman po sila na mapayapang pagkilos or mapayapang kilos protesta yung brand talaga ng Catholic Church, and we're grateful for the leadership that we have. And yun, we do our best, and we have marshals there to ensure the safety of everyone. They'll be working in coordination with the PNP. And hopefully, we'll have a similar conduct to September 21.
So how does this move forward from the first one? I was also there in the first one on September 21.
Opo.
So many things have happened.
Yes.
Many things have erupted. Many things have been said. There are developments in the investigation. So what now is the main messaging of this event on November 30?
So we have 5 points po. So the first is ilantad. So we want to know the full truth of what's going on. And I think because of recent events, the particular call we have right now is for the President to certify as urgent the bill creating a truly independent commission on infrastructure so that it can serve beyond the pleasure of the President. No? Because currently, as the ICI stands, it serves at the pleasure of the President. If he wants it to stop, they will stop, right? So we want to have an independent commission because his name was mentioned. Even if yung testimonies of Representative Zaldy, there's some questions about it, it's still in the public discourse. And so because the President is involved, he should recuse himself from the investigation. So that's our current call for transparency. The second is ibalik. So si Congressman Chel Diokno talks about how forfeiture cases can be filed right away. No? So we can get the money, the ill-gotten wealth back, before filing the heavier cases involving plunder, criminal cases, and so
Hence
forth.
the auction of the luxury cars.
Yes. And so we want to see more of that, beyond just, say, the Discayas, but all the other contractors, congressmen, legislators involved in the issue. The third is ikulong, that hasn't changed. Ikulong na yung mga kurakot. That's been the chant even before we organized the rally. And we'd want to see top officials jailed, not just the couple of contractors and district engineers that have been arrested so far. But we'd want, see Representative Zaldy. We hope that the President commits to the recommendation of the DPWH to also investigate Speaker Martin Romualdez, despite the familial ties, and high officials also from the Senate and the DPWH, DBM. We'd like to see them investigated as well. The last two, igalang, because there's a lot of discussion about things, silly things like civilian military junta, transition council, whatever have you. Our calls are strictly within the framework of the 87 Constitution, and any unelected body sort of taking power, I think, is contradictory to that. So we are opposing that, and we're saying let's respect our 87 Constitution and use the mechanisms within it to pursue accountability. And the last is ipanalo ang sampayanan laban sa mga dinastiya. Because what we've seen in political dynasties in the recent months, in recent weeks, is that when they are getting along, they shield each other from accountability, and when they're at war with each other, everyone gets caught in the crossfire.
Right.
So we want to put an end to like these dynasties. We want to have a body of leaders that actually looks like the Philippines and isn't just the same names again and again. So these are the calls that we have for the 30th.
Okay. So, well, to follow up on some of those points, so are you happy that there are now like 8 or 9 that are charged? In fact, meron ng mga panukala na ikulong na sila, no? Itong contractors are actually congressmen found out to also be owners of these construction companies that have government contracts.
So, inaantabayanan po natin yung December 15 na deadline na binigay ng Ombudsman. Talagang seseryosohin ba nila yung, okay, itong mga kaso against the 60 or so, 68, I think, congressmen. Will that really materialize? We hope it does. But again, kung si Zaldy ko lang yung makakasuhan, important naman na makasuhan siya. Pero malinaw naman na hindi lang siya yung sangkot sa issue na ito.
Kaya
so again,
ba yung December 15?
I'll have to consult the lawyers po, pero the people I talked to, both from the pronouncements of si Ombudsman Remulla and also the lawyers I talked to within our camp, parang they say realistic naman for cases to be filed.
Pero don't you wonder about all those ghost projects? You can start there. I mean, a gaping hole for 12 years.
Yeah.
Clearly, kung bayad na yung contractor, you just follow that trail. Bakit ghost project? I'm wondering why, sa dinami-dami ng ghost projects na nakita, bakit yun pa lang ang mga kinasuhan?
Well, I think this also has to do with transparency po, di ba? So, I think, you have, let's say, you found a ghost project in this particular area and then there's a tarpaulin there. How does that map to the GAA? How does that map to the NEP? How does that map to the person who inserted it in the budget? No? So parang because that information is not readily accessible or very easily accessible, kaya nagkakaroon ng pause between identifying the ghost project and then holding someone accountable. So I think an important step for accountability is also to pass freedom of information law to make sure this information, the flow of information is more easy. So we have an easier time holding these people accountable.
Well, to get SEC papers daw, you have to pay, you have to apply.
Right.
So it's not that easy. I mean, it's possible, but still not that easy.
Or even now sa diba, there's a new policy sa ombudsman that we can ask for the SAL-ends and again of certain officials. Pero again, parang may proseso ito. There is a certain fee that you have to pay. I think having an FOI that provides a general framework for so we don't have to adjust to the different policies of the different offices. It just has a general framework that's easy for any citizen to use, so go far.
So stick to the Constitution, meaning RevGov is not something you would push for.
No, I think at least our group po medyo matatag po yung commitment natin sa 87 Constitution. Kasi talagang malalim din po yung laban na dinanas ng mga nauna sa atin to achieve that constitution. No? So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are a lot of ideals within the constitution that still I think we can pursue to hold people accountable and to exact real structural reforms, like the passage of an anti-political dynasty law. That's provided in the constitution. It hasn't been done yet, but for the first time in history, even though medyo kaduda-duda din kasi galing dinastiya din si Speaker Boji Dee, parang sinabi niya na in-endorse niya yung anti-political dynasty law. So itulak natin yan. Let's see how far it goes before saying things that are more abandon the victories that we already had.
Well, that would be
86,
something. I mean,
Yeah.
parang divorce law lang yan, divorce bill. Walang gusto magdiborsyo kasi walang gusto magbayad ng alimony. Gusto lang nila marami silang mistress.
Oo naman.
So hindi pumapasa. But you think it just might be possible?
It might be. I wouldn't, if you gave me a percentage on it, wala pa siyang, I still wouldn't say above 50%, pero may opening. Kasi never pa natin nakita na may speaker na nag-endorse. There are 11 bills, I think, in the House of Representatives the last time I checked. And then 2 were filed after si Speaker Boji Dee made the statement. So mukhang may effect yun kahit paano. And then there's 5 in the Senate right now. So we'll see. I wouldn't say it is the most likely of outcomes, pero especially if people call for it, like kami sa Trillion Peso March, we're putting that right alongside ending corruption as a main call of the program. Just to, because again, we see how destructive dynasties are in any situation. When they like each other, they protect each other. When they don't like each other,
And they protect the wealth.
They protect the wealth, more importantly. And then when they don't like each other, parang damay tayong lahat sa bangayan, di ba? So maybe, it's time to end that way of governing the country.
Tingnan natin. That sounds a little more hopeful than about 20 years ago when I first heard about ending political dynasties. It never happened. So maybe. Okay, so this particular movement is not calling for the resignation of anyone. Walang mga personalidad burning in effigies, there is no color in this particular event.
Well,
Ay, nakadilaw pala siya, tsaka pink ako. Nagkataon lang po. Hindi po yan sinadya.
So po, it's the birthday of si Senator Ninoy today. So we had an event.
Well, in agenda, we're color-coded. So pink and brown are the colors of the day. Ganun lang yun. Okay.
Yun po, nagkataon lang. But I mean, if you want to infer, at least on my end, if you want to infer something more than that, I mean, that's not a wrong inference necessarily.
Feel free to do
but,
so.
yeah, I think for November 30, at least within the consensus of the Trillion Peso March, we're not making any calls for resignation. But I think, to be fair to those calling for that, I don't necessarily think that's against the Constitution, as long as the call is for the person involved to resign ng kusa on their own free will. No? So if what is, I think, very clearly against the Constitution is if you call for the military to then step in and sort of try to effect that kind of resignation, yun yung mali. And that's something, that's what we're...
to sedition.
Right, exactly. So that's something that we are very strongly monitoring and against as far as our ranks are concerned. No? But to say na walang kulay, it's true na walang kulay yung corruption. No? And I would encourage everyone from all colors to stand up when they see our officials being corrupt. But it's also true na medyo paulit-ulit yung mga pangalan na nangungurakot, right? And so I wouldn't say that it's completely colorless because there is a certain faction, there are certain factions of our politics na paulit-ulit silang nasasangkot. So yun, I think just as important as calling for accountability and seeing these people in jail, we also need to organize for the coming elections, in the barangay elections for those officials involved, the 2028 elections for the higher officials. And we need to organize to tell people or remind people na yung baha na dinanas nyo, yung gutom na dinadanas nyo because may katiwalian sa mga farm-to-market roads, yung paghihirap na dinadanas nyo because of yung mga GL letters for healthcare, yung kakulangan ng classrooms, that all has a root in corruption. And there are faces na hindi lang strike one nila yung issue na ito. Their names and faces come up again and again and again. Can we please turn our back on them this 2028?
I imagine that this kind of corruption has been going on forever. Kaya lang ngayon medyo mas lalaki ng mga amount. Yun, sabi nga nila mas garapal ngayon. Kaya ayan, sumabog. So I would imagine that the guys who have been doing it forever know what they're doing. So do you believe that it will really take hard evidence to prove guilt of corruption and that we should go through this longish process of proving with evidence?
Well, I don't think the process has to be that long, no? Kasi again, yung position ni Kong Chel Diokno is, I think you can put reasonable limits on corruption trials. No? Na parang the trial doesn't have to be longer than 3 years. The appeal process doesn't have to be longer than 2 years. Parang these things need to be tried right away. And I think since I'm not a lawyer, I can't comment on the rules of evidence. No? But speaking from a political perspective, again, I go back to the 2019 election, which is when si Jinggoy Estrada, Bong Revilla, and the late Senator Juan Ponce Enrile ran for re-election after being linked to the PIDAS scam. What happened there was Enrile was kicked out despite being a mainstay in Senate. Si Jinggoy Estrada was also kicked out despite coming in number 2 the last time he ran. And Bong Revilla won, but he came in at 11 despite coming in at number 1 the last time he ran. 4 million people changed their minds na, corrupt pala siya. We didn't vote for him. He was propped up by the Duterte slate because he was part of that slate. So what I think is the people know to kick these people out, but our leaders and our lawyers need to step up to that desire. No? So our lawyers, again, I'm not an expert on the law, but definitely there needs to be more rigor in the prosecution. But in terms of our politics then, that administration that is sitting in power matters if you care about corruption. Kasi kung aliado lang ng kasalukuyang administrasyon yung mga nasasangkot, then definitely they'll have a freer ride. And that's what we've seen in the cases of Revilla, Jinggoy, and Enrile. Even though the people turned their back on them, somehow the sitting administration decides to give them a free pass. No? So I think there is a political element to this too. And we need to take seriously the electoral aspect of corruption, the political aspect of accountability, if we want to finally end this kind of corruption in the Philippines.
So, you think BBM will survive all this? Because sabi nga nila, iba yung legal sa perception or political. Political is perception. So, he seems to be surviving Zaldy ko. I mean, so for now, when you look at Zaldy ko, he gives details, pero sabi nga, people seem to be like of the opinion, nasaan yung ebidensya mo? Bakit wala ka dito sa bansa? I mean, Marcos, parang drugs, o bumenta na yan. And then, from my perspective, parang people turned against her instead. Because nakakabatang kapatid, bakit mo ginanon, etc. So, and he survived the protest rallies. So, what do you think is he doing right?
So I have two thoughts. No? So yung kay Senator Amy, I really think that's just, again, the toxic part of political dynasties pag nag-aaway sila. Di natamay tayo, di ba? So parang I did not need to hear the sibling hinanakits of Senator Amy. And yet, parang for 30 minutes, she spoke in a rally about it. So ako, that just hammered home na, okay, medyo pampagulo yung sinabi niya, but let's end political dynasties so we don't have to be drawn into the psychodrama between two siblings. No? Yung kay Zaldy ko naman, if I'm being honest, if you say something negative about President Marcos, I will most likely believe that. Right? Because, again, it's a Marcos and they have a track record of impunity, of corruption in this country. But tama naman na kailangang dumaan sa tamang proseso kasi everyone has their own biases, right? So what has to happen is on the end of Congressman Ko, he should come home to give his testimony. And on the end of the Marcos administration, kung totoo nga na may banta sa buhay niya, they need to guarantee his security. They need to do everything in their power to make sure that due process is given to his testimony. And that's the only way that President Marcos's name will be cleared. So in terms of is he surviving, I guess, will he make it to 2028? Maybe, maybe not. But what I think is very certain is you're not going to see Marcos's candidate or Marcos's successor win in 2028 because, he's the most unpopular president since Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. He is, whether involved or not, he had his hand on the wheel during this massive corruption scam involving sums of money that we've never heard of before. And I think he's making the best argument to that the argument that actually we didn't have that we failed at making, but he's making the best argument that can be made to say that we should never have a Marcos again as a president.
Did he say that?
No, but I think his actions make that argument for him. His failures make that argument for him.
Okay. Parang that's the deduction.
Yeah.
Parang that's the ultimate conclusion.
Right.
Well, hindi ka ba bumibilib na siya mismo ang naglabas nung 15 mga pangalan at sabi niya, ako nagsimula nito, ako magtatapos nito?
Well, again, I think he was drawn into it. Parang pinahiya siya or pinahiya niya yung sarili niya dahil binagit niya yung flood control noong 2024 kahit na sobrang palpak yung lahat ng flood control dito sa Metro Manila, at least and apparently the rest of the country as well. And then parang he brought that shame, that deserved shame to the 2025 SONA, thought he made up for it. But again, this whole issue emerged and he didn't realize, I think, what had to be done. Kasi look at the ICI. No? I think that's something civil society was calling for. But si President Marcos had to be dragged sort of by the feet to put that up. And then even when it was put up, diba, parang they continued to dilly-dally on making the hearings public. And again, it is not a fully independent commission. Parang nobody was given a say on to who would sit there, even though I believe at least very much in the integrity of Sec Babes. No? Nobody, it was just the decision of the president who would sit there. So I think he didn't realize how big this issue would become. No? So I think, again, while, okay, it's better that we're having this discussion I'd rather be having this discussion than not have it. But the reason we got here in the first place was, okay, how did those budgets get signed? It's his signature in the end.
Another independent people's commission, is it necessary?
I wouldn't say another, but a commission that is independent of Malacanang. No? Because currently, it serves at his pleasure. If he says, I don't want it anymore, it will be gone. Right? And it's talagang problematic yun kasi dawit na nga yung pangalan niya dito sa corruption issue. Whether you believe Zaldy ko or not, nasa diskurso na yun. Na parang may mga mali-maleta supposedly na dinala sa Malacanang or wherever. So, not to say that you should believe that at face value, but that narrative should be given due course. So, one, Zaldy ko needs to come home, but two, it needs to be heard by a body that is clearly independent of the president. And a good way to do that is to make this independent commission or create an independent commission na mula sa Kongreso yung kapangyarihan niya para hindi siya pwedeng buwagin ng presidente kung trip lang niya. Right? So, yes, I do think we need not necessarily another ICI, but an ICI with a different set of powers.
That would oversee their findings or to be simultaneously investigating?
I would even be open to perhaps even if it's the current ICI, but the current composition the appointment needs to be approved by Congress. And then once they're appointed, their terms are hindi siya pwedeng galawin ng presidente. That might even be enough, no? Again, I'm not that I think that's a broader discussion to be had. But just an ICI with clear independence from Malacanang, I think would go a long way to shedding light on these cases, specifically the points brought up by Zaldy ko. And more generally, I think that they would have more confidence from people.
But my gosh, that's just about infrastructure projects. We have the BIR, we have the customs, we have... Montulfo was here and he was saying, Korina, even the PNP. O sabi naman niya ganon, parang ayoko nang malaman. One at a time, hindi na kaya ng powers ko.
Ay,
Diba?
baka nga.
So, but you're hopeful that this could be a start.
It could be a start. Hindi ko alam kung kailan ito matatapos. Siyempre, baka yung susunod na presidente, mahirapan din siya. How do we just, pag nakita niya yung full extent ng gulo, paano natin to aayusin? How do we root out all of these structures?
Baka nawala nang tumakbo kasi hindi na sila pwede gumawa ng pera.
Well, sana parang siguro para sa mga mabubuting politiko, it's really time na put up or shut up, diba? Parang kung talagang may prinsipyo ka, I think it's going to be a very hard presidency sa 2028 kung sino man yung mananalo. Pero kung believe ka talaga, or if you really have that integrity, then you have to make that effort.
Well, you have to drink a lot of vitamins. You have to live long, Kiko.
This person, kung sino man, na hindi ako yun. Pero kung sino man
like you. I mean, people who believe that there is hope for the country should live long enough to see that through.
Pero, I mean, marami namang umasa dito sa bansaan natin na hindi rin nila nakita yung gusto nilang mangyari, di ba? So,
you're telling me? I've interviewed them all.
Right. But I mean, I don't know if I should feel entitled to see that if people who did so much more for the cause that came before me also didn't see that, diba? So ako parang kung ano man yung oras na binigay sa akin, I will devote it to the things that I care about. And then if I see bonus na lang siguro if I see progress, but if not, then I mean worse things have happened to worse people.
Okay, bakit nila pinipilit yung Sandro Marcos versus Kiko Dee in the future?
Well, may Sandro Marcos versus Kiko B na ngayon. I think that's enough, right?
What's Kiko B? Ano yun? Okay. Ano ba? O sige na nga. Ano ba yan? O wag na natin banggitin out loud. But, I'm thinking about this. There was a sudden utos, diba? A sudden requirement of Vince Dizon to propose the filing of charges against the former Speaker Martin Romualdez. That's a surprise to me. It is also a surprise to me that the president is really calling out against Zaldy ko and saying, you are coming back here to face the music. Whereas before, parang the common notion is that he wouldn't want Zaldy ko to come back. So could it be that this will be, in the end, a PBBM versus Martin Romualdez?
Actually, it's a lot to make sense of. And medyo parang paiba-iba yung nagiging diskurso kay Speaker Martin. Eh. Kasi yun,
Zaldy ko doesn't really mention Martin Romualdez much.
it's interesting nga, no? Although, ayun, just tracking it down. So, DPWH, Sec Vince Dizon recommended the charges. But I think, the week before that, si President Marcos himself in a press con said na, okay, medyo mahina ata yung ebidensya kay Speaker Martin. And then, I think a few days ago lang, the ICI seemed to walk back on that then kay Speaker Martin. I'll double check po if I heard that right now. Pero parang nagdadalawang isip ata yung gobyerno. Eh. What I would hope is, let the evidence go where it goes. Kung talagang may nakita yung DPWH, then let's pursue that case and then let's see Speaker Martin face the music then. And yeah, I would agree. Mukhang katakataka nga na hindi nababanggit masyado yung pangalan ni Speaker Martin. Although it was mentioned enough. No? Na parang, it's not as if, Zaldy ko is trying to paint himself as innocent, which is not very credible. But it's not as if he's painting si Speaker Martin as completely innocent. Binanggit naman niya na siya yung nagsabi na what the president wants, the president gets. Diba? So,
but ultimately pointing to the first family.
Ultimately pointing to the first family, which I definitely would want to know if that's true. No? Okay. So, I don't know what to make of it. Maybe that's how it ends up going.
Parang there's too much to think about anyway. Let the chips fall where they may. Ganun na lang. Oh. So ano sa palagay mo ang ending ng teleseryeng ito? A revenge vote in 2028.
I think that's what I'm working towards. No? Definitely. I think I want to see na bukod sa manalo yung mga kandidato na sinusuportahan ko, talagang yung mga paulit-ulit na pangalan na nadadawit sa korupsyon, pwede bang wag na natin silang ibalik. Right? And kung again, parang we say paulit-ulit. But I point to, we are able to do it. We have been able to kick out corrupt politicians before using the ballot. And we've never had an electoral movement against corruption. The closest siguro would have been 2010 na kung walang corrupt, walang mahirap. But that was really on the back of the Pinoy sort of campaign. No? But to have a real campaign na ito yung mga corrupt, wag na natin silang iboto. Right? Maybe that's something that we can,
you have to start that campaign early.
Yeah.
Malapit ng 2020.
Wala namang premature negative campaigning, no? So baka pwede naman.
Pwede naman mga pari-parinig, gano'n. Wow, Kiko Dee, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much
for coming to my home. Well, I made my home my set. So maraming salamat and we'll be monitoring. I'll be there on the ground and we'll see each other there.
Yes, definitely po. See you there and thank you po for everyone viewing. Again, November 30 for the Trillion Peso March Part 2 at People Power Monument.